In the seventh series of Freeing the Butterfly Within, Brother Khalil Jaffer continued his topic of addictions, attachments, suffering, and spiritual evolution. He began by reflecting on the previous night's discussion about addictions and attachments and how they hinder spiritual growth. He explained that we form addictions quickly because the instinctive or animal nature within us, or the tabi'a, is concerned only with physical comfort and survival. It seeks pleasure and avoids pain. It rests at the first place of comfort and resists struggle. He illustrated this with the example of a child learning to walk. A child is comfortable crawling and resists walking because walking involves falling and pain. Yet, if the child never learns to walk, crawling will eventually become painful in adulthood. The child lacks foresight, but the fitrah, or the divine nature within us, has foresight. It knows that walking will one day be necessary. In the same way, although the tabi'a seeks pleasure and comfort, the fitrah pushes us to break addictions and detach from worldly attachments. The fitrah knows that when we leave this world and enter the next, we will need spiritual strength. If we remain spiritually crawling, we will suffer in the hereafter. As we grow older, we begin to realize that we move from one pleasure to another, one hobby, one ambition, one relationship, yet nothing satisfies us completely. Perhaps this dissatisfaction exists because in our origin, we tasted something more perfect and more beautiful, just as an infant first tastes its mother's milk. We have tasted closeness to Allah. We are, in a sense, addicted to Allah, searching to return to that original state of purity that Prophet Adam alayhi salam had before descending to earth. Brother Khalil referenced Surah Al-Infitar, chapter 82, verse 6, in which Allah addresses humanity. O mankind, what has deceived you from your Lord? Not just any Lord, but your kind and compassionate Lord. Allah is waiting for us. What is distracting us? As we begin to detach from addictions and unplug the connection between ourselves and Allah, we taste the sweetness of divine love. Once someone experiences the love of Allah, nothing else can replace it. There is no longer a restless craving for something more. One is no longer driven by greed or fear. Brother Khalil cited the famous line from the supplication of Imam Hussein alayhi salam in Dua Arafah. What did he find who lost you? And what did he lose who found you? Once a person finds Allah, nothing is truly missing from their life. And if someone has not found Allah, whatever else they have found is illusion. He emphasized that the Imams alayhimussalam did not come as obstacles between us and Allah, but as teachers guiding us toward Him. Human beings are unique because they can consciously communicate with their Creator. He referenced the supplication taught by Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam in Dua Abu Hamza al-Tumari, where the Imam says that the journey toward Allah is not far. Allah is never veiled from His creatures. Rather, it is our actions and even our misplaced hopes in other than Him that veil us. Brother Khalil then addressed a central question. If our fitrah longs for Allah, why must the journey involve suffering? Why is pain necessary in becoming the butterfly? He explained that suffering is inherent to this plane of existence. The tabi'a asks, why am I suffering? The fitrah asks, what is the wisdom behind my suffering? Instead of asking why, we should ask what lesson or purification this suffering carries. He clarified that he could not claim to know the specific cause of anyone's suffering, but he urged a shift in perspective. Perhaps suffering is a wake-up call, an opportunity to detach from addictions and return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Last night we talked about addictions and attachments and how they hinder our spiritual growth and evolution. And we said part of the reason we addict ourselves quickly is because the instinct nature, the animal nature within us that we call tabi'a, is very quick to form habits and to attach. And because tabi'a is only concerned with the physical body and with comfort and does not want any form of pain and constantly wants to fight for survival, it very quickly rests at the first place of comfort. It does not want to struggle. And this is why, as children, when we learn how to crawl, we do not want to walk. We have to be forced to walk. The child's tabi'a says, I am comfortable, I can move around crawling. Why do I need to walk? It is painful to walk. Every time I stand, I try to walk, I fall. My tabi'a says, I don't want pain, I want pleasure, I want comfort, I'm comfortable. What the child does not realize is that if they remain crawling and they grow and become an adult without learning how to walk, when they become 20, 30, 40 years old, it will become a pain to move around the world crawling. Because tabi'a does not have foresight. Fitrah knows that I need to walk because this will be important to me at some point. It is for this reason that even though our tabi'a wants pleasure, wants physical pleasure, wants addiction, fitrah wants to break addiction, wants to help us detach from attachments, wants us to become spiritual, because fitrah knows that when we leave this world and go to the next, we will need to know how to walk. If we are still crawling, we will suffer in the hereafter. The other thing we saw as well is that the older we get, the more we come to this realization that we jump from one pleasure to another, from one hobby to another, from one dream and ambition to another, because nothing seems to give us that happiness that we seek, from one relationship to another. And this, we said, is perhaps because in our fitrah, in our origin, we have tasted something more perfect, more beautiful, more unlimited. And because, like Musa alayhi salam had drunk his mother's milk first, and we have tasted that, that is why nothing gives us joy. We are addicted to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and now we are searching for that. We are trying to go back to that original state that Adam was in before he was sent down to this earth. And it is for this reason perhaps that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Infitar, chapter 82 of the Quran, verse 6, addresses us as a species. O insan, what is it that has deceived you from your Lord? What is it that is distracting you from your Lord? Not just your Lord, Rabbikal Kareem, your kind Lord, your compassionate Lord. He is waiting for you. What is it that is turning you away from this? And as we begin to separate from attachments and addictions, and we unclog that connection that is already there between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we begin to taste the sweetness of that. And once we experience the love of Allah, then nothing can replace that. We will not crave for any higher form of love or happiness. We will be able to continue functioning like others do, but there won't be this unhappiness, this constant wanting something more. We will not be driven by greed or fear. And it is this as well that we see written between, when we read between the lines in the ad'iya or the du'as that come to us from the ma'asumin alayhi salam, who are realized beings. For example, in the dua of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, that is well known as the dua of Arafah, that he recited on the plains of Arafat when he had gone for Hajj on one occasion. In this, there is that famous line that many of you know, in which he says to Allah, my Lord, what did he find, he who lost you? And what did he lose, he who found you? What a profound statement. What Imam Hussein alayhi salam is saying is that, oh Allah, once a person has found you, there is nothing they will miss in their lives. What did he lose, he who found you? And if someone has not found you, my Lord, what did he really find? He is simply running from illusion to illusion. So this idea that Allah is too supreme for me to even comprehend or know or understand or come close to is false. The Imams alayhimus salam did not come to stand between us and Allah as obstacles. They came as teachers to help us connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what makes us such a special species. The fact that we can be special and can communicate with the Lord of the universe. No other species talks to Allah with such consciousness and awareness to their creator the way we do. In another dua from the son of this Imam, our fourth Imam, Imam Ali Zainul Abidin salawatullahi salamu alayhi, and I think this is from the dua he taught his companion Abu Hamza Thumali, that we call dua Abu Hamza Thumali. In this, the Imam says, my Lord, the journey towards you is very short. It is not that far. It is an illusion to think that it is so far. It is very near, you are very close, and you are never veiled from your creatures. You are never disconnected from your creatures, except that what veils them from you are their actions for other than you. And then there is another version of this dua. In another version, it is said that the Imam did not say illa an tahjubahum a'maluhum dunak, but he said illa an tahjubahum a'malu dunak. In Arabic, amal with an ayn is action, and amal with an alif is hope. So this is even more beautiful, that the Imam may have said that, oh Allah, you are never veiled from your creatures, but what veils them from you are the hopes they have in other than you. So this is essentially a summary that where we stopped at last night. Now, what we want to do now tonight is take this to the next level and say, we acknowledge that our fitrah is longing for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is our goal. He is our end. That is what we seek. And we need to awaken this fitrah. Now the question is that why is there so much pain and suffering in seeking this closeness to Allah? Why must we suffer to come close to Allah? Why is there a need for this pain and suffering in the process of becoming this butterfly? And we have already hinted at some of this in the previous nights when we talked about suffering. One of the things we said is it is the nature of this plane of existence that everyone suffers. And as long as we stay in this cycle of asking, why must I suffer, we will not evolve, because it is tabi'a that wants to flee from physical pain and seek pleasure. It is tabi'a that asks, why am I suffering? Whether I'm suffering physically in an illness or I'm suffering emotionally in a relationship, it is tabi'a that asks, why am I suffering? Fitrah does not ask, why am I suffering? Fitrah seeks the wisdom behind the suffering. And therefore, I am not saying that tonight when we talk about pain and suffering in the process of becoming enlightened, I will tell you why you suffer in whatever method you have found your life to challenge you. I cannot be audacious enough to say I know the cause of your suffering. But what I will attempt to do is shift our perspective and our attitude so that at least instead of asking why am I suffering, we ask, I accept that life is suffering. I simply need to find out what is the wisdom behind my suffering. Perhaps I have some addictions in life which are separating me from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this suffering and this calamity is a jolt to wake me up so that I detach from those addictions and thereby return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is for us to discover. And I said, you are the best person to know what is the wisdom behind your individual suffering. We suffer in two ways. Sometimes we suffer through pain, and sometimes we suffer because we are not able to get pleasure.
Brother Khalil described two types of patience: patience over pain and patience over desire. Citing the wisdom of Imam Ali alayhi salam, he explained that patience over desire is greater than patience over pain. When in pain, we often have no choice but to endure. But when tempted by desire, we have an exit. We could commit sin. Choosing restraint for the sake of Allah carries greater spiritual weight. He explained that identifying entirely with the body makes resisting temptation feel difficult. But if we shift perspective and say, there is anger within me, instead of I am angry, we create space between ourselves and our emotions. This disidentification empowers spiritual discipline. Using the metaphor of the caterpillar, Brother Khalil explained that transformation requires struggle. The rebirth into a butterfly is not self-chosen. It occurs by Allah's will when readiness is achieved. If someone prematurely cuts open a chrysalis to help the caterpillar, it will emerge deformed and unable to fly. The struggle is essential for the formation of wings. Similarly, suffering is not cruelty, it is wing formation. He cited Surah Al-Inshiqaq, chapter 84, verse 6, O mankind, you are laboring toward your Lord with intense labor, and you will meet Him. Allah's aim is to perfect us for paradise. If we refuse voluntary spiritual struggle, calamities may push us in that direction, not as punishment, but as mercy. He emphasized Allah's immense mercy, quoting a teaching attributed to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that he was amazed at people who must be dragged in chains to paradise. Often, Allah saves us from sins and disasters we nearly fell into, pulling us back from destruction.
In a hadith that is in Nahj al-Balagha from Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, he says this, patience are of two kinds, patience over what pleases you and patience over what pains you. And then he says, bearing patience over what you desire has more value than bearing patience over what pains you. Why? Because when you are in pain and when you suffer, there is nothing you can do about it except bear patience. What will you do? You might get a little depressed, you might get upset, but there isn't much you can do except bear patience. But when you are overcome with desire, you have a way out, except that that way out is haram. So now you have a choice. So when you bear patience over desire and you choose not to give in to temptation, then your patience has higher value because you have an exit. You could commit sin if you want, but you have resisted it for the sake of Allah. Therefore that patience has even higher value. Okay. So we're looking at it from both perspectives. And that is why we also mentioned in one of the early nights that when our young men and women ask, why is it so hard to resist temptation? We said it is actually not hard to resist temptation. It feels hard because we are completely identified with the body. Because we are completely thinking, I am the thinker in my head. So we are convinced from a tabi'i perspective that I need this pleasure. I have to give in to this temptation. And that is why it feels like if I don't get it, it is painful. But if I disidentify from the body, if I see myself as being a soul in an alien body, then now I don't think of the pleasure as me. I think of it as something within me. In other words, instead of saying I am angry, if I was to start saying there is anger within me, it is simply words, but it shifts my perspective. Because now I don't identify with the anger. I say I am not angry. I am a spiritual being. There is anger in me. I am not depressed. There is depression in me. I am not desireful of something. There is desire within me. The moment I do that, I create some space between me and that feeling and that emotion. And that takes me now, gives me the courage to resist and to have the right patience. So when we are moving from being a caterpillar to a butterfly, there are two things that have to occur. One is the struggle, the labor. Just like the caterpillar that pushes and pushes and has an exoskeleton and keeps trying to come out of its shell. The other is the rebirth that occurs. The rebirth is not up to us. When we are ready, it happens by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even the caterpillar does not choose when to be born again. So in the same manner, when we choose to evolve spiritually, we find a prescription for ourselves. Then we struggle day by day by day by day. That is the labor, that is the pushing, that is the methods we seek. And then when the time is right, there is a sudden collapse of the ego boundary. There is an enlightenment that fills our lives. Now, we still ask this question, but why must it go through a process of suffering? Why could I not become enlightened without suffering? You see, if a butterfly had human intellect, the butterfly would ask the same question. Why must I struggle and shed my exoskeleton and sleep in that chrysalis for 8 or 10 months and go through all the chemical changes and deconstruct and reconstruct before my wings can grow? Why? But let us think of the opposite for a moment. Let us suppose we saw this caterpillar in its chrysalis hanging from the stem of a tree, and we felt sorry for it, and we felt compassion and said, the poor creature is struggling and struggling and struggling. Here, let me help it. And then we take a surgical knife or a box cutter or whatever, and we slit the chrysalis open. Are we doing it a favor? What is going to happen? Because it is not ready to emerge from its shell, because it has not finished struggling as much as it needs to struggle for the wings to develop, we cripple it for life. It will never become a butterfly. Now it will remain a deformed worm that will burn in the sun and die. So we have not been fair, nor have we been kind and compassionate by interfering in that process. That journey of struggle was very important in the formation of the wing. It is for this reason that Allah wants you to experience what your mind and your ego and your tabi'a thinks is suffering, but it's not actually suffering. It is the growing of wings in us. And it is for this reason that we must shift our perspective. And we have been quoting a verse of the Quran from Surah Al-Inshiqaq, chapter 84, verse 6. Ya ayyuhal insan, O men, again Allah is not addressing Muslims, all of our species. Ya ayyuhal insan, innaka kadihun ila rabbika qadhan famulaqih. O man, O insan, you are constantly laboring with a severe laboring. Towards whom? Towards your Lord, and you shall meet him. But we don't understand. We still say, why? Allah's aim is to take us to Jannah. Jannah is an abode of perfection. To live in that, to survive in that, we must become perfect beings. And Allah will do anything possible to get us there. If we, by our own volition and choice, will not stand up and begin struggling spiritually and doing jihadun nafs and tazkiyatun nafs, then Allah may, I'm not saying this is the only reason we face calamities, but He may give us calamities to force us in that direction. Because this is temporary. Allah does not care whether you live 40, 60, 80 or 100 years. Because He knows you're in a shell here. This is a cage. You are not free here. He wants you for there. And He will do whatever is necessary. Try you in any manner possible until you make it very clear to Him that you are not interested in Jannah. We are told that on one occasion, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he was seen smiling. His companion said, Ya Rasulullah, what is it that makes you smile? He said, a thought crossed my mind. I am amazed at people who have to be dragged in chains to go to Jannah. I am amazed at people whom Allah has to tie in chains and drag them to Jannah because they don't want to go to Jannah. How many times have you and I almost come close to committing a major sin, but Allah saved us? How many times have we thought of saying something or doing something that we would regret for the rest of our lives, but Allah saved us? Because we are asleep, listening to tabi'a, like animals just heedless, And when we are not yet ready, Allah out of His mercy keeps pulling us back. In Surah Al-Isra, which is chapter 17 of the Quran, verse 11, He says, when man prays, he does dua for evil as he ought to have done for good. And that is because he is of a hasty nature. He wants it now and he wants it now. Allah is saying this, that you are praying to me for evil as you ought to have prayed for good. How many times have we prayed for things that were destructive for ourselves or for others? We are in a relationship we're not happy with. Oh Allah, just kill him or just kill her. Right? He prays for evil when he should have prayed for good. Allah has put you in a situation where you're meant to learn and grow. But your tabi'a doesn't want pain. It only wants pleasure. So I don't care what you do, Allah, just fix it for me. Why? Because man is hasty. He has no patience. It is this tabi'a nature that wants things now and wants it now. It is almost impossible to go to hell. You really have to struggle hard to go to hell. If only you listen to your fitrah. And the first step is changing our attitude towards suffering and calamities. Accepting that suffering and calamities is very important in our evolution. The only people, my dear brothers and sisters, who don't suffer in this world are the people of hellfire. They are the people who get their share of reward and comfort and ease in this world so that there is nothing for them left in the hereafter. Otherwise, every human being that you see suffering, whether he is Muslim or non-Muslim, Allah's intention by that is to bring him towards His fitrah, to bring him towards Tawheed, to bring him towards Himself. So when Allah has chosen you, that means you are special to Him. That is why you are able to do that good thing. That is why when you seek something that has to do with the hereafter, which is in its essence good, and you see the path being opened up for you and it is becoming easy for you, it is because Allah holds you special in His eyes. And that is why He is using you to do that good instead of using anyone else. Now let's go back to our discussion on suffering. The other reason that we said suffering and calamities is important in our spiritual evolution is because sometimes we think we have made it. When life is comfortable, no one knows what their real value and what their real ability or capacity is. We only know ourselves when we experience suffering. When life is good, even an atheist does good. I have known and heard and read of atheists who say, I can do the same good that you who believe in God does without believing in God. You give charity. I am a philanthropist. I have given millions in charity and I don't believe in God. I am doing good only for the sake of goodness. So where is the difference between the goodness you do and the goodness that the atheist does? The difference is when calamities befall. The way you behave and the way he behaves will be different. You believe in the hereafter. You believe you have a soul. You believe there is a Lord watching you. So when calamity befalls you, you stand with courage. The atheist does not believe life has a purpose. The atheist believes here he is by accident. The atheist believes there is no value in life or life after death. The atheist believes he is just an animal. So when a lot of calamities befall him and it is too painful to bear life, he does not see the purpose of life. He commits suicide and kills himself. So you begin to see the difference only when calamities befall. Even in Karbala, and this is, I'm not coming to Masaib, but in Karbala, when you read the books of Maqtal, you will see there are places where Imam Hussein alayhi salam looked to the heavens and said, Oh Allah, this musibah is easier for me because I know you are watching me. In particular, when his baby was hit with a spear, when Ali al-Asghar was hit with a spear, he looked to the heavens and said, Oh Allah, this is difficult for Hussein to bear, but it has become easier for me to bear because I know I am under your watch and you are a witness to what I am going through. So knowing Allah is present in our lives makes that difference. Suffering doesn't just bring out our true colors in the negative sense, in the sense of how bad I am or how weak I am in my faith. It also brings out the good in me. For example, we have a hadith that says, whoever dedicates himself sincerely to Allah for 40 days, concentrating, focusing in his spirituality to Allah only, then springs of wisdom will burst forth from his heart and begin showing on his tongue. This is a very popular hadith. What does this tell us? This tells us that wisdom is already there in our hearts. This hadith does not say that whoever dedicates himself for 40 days to Allah, Allah will give him wisdom. It says wisdom will burst forth from his heart out onto his tongue. So each one of us is a sage. Each one of us is enlightened in potential. Each one of us knows the truth. Each one of us has wisdom. But it is latent, it is sitting, it is sleeping, it needs to be awakened. What does that 40 days of spirituality do? Fitrah reigns in tabi'a. It controls how much you eat. It controls how much you sleep. It controls your remembrance of Allah. It controls your distraction with the world, your addictions. And in doing so, in that hardship, wisdom begins to emerge. So hardship and suffering reveals beauty as well. It brings out good as well in us. And therefore suffering tells us who amongst us is gold, who amongst us is silver, who amongst us is brass and copper, who amongst us is mud. You may have heard the saying, people are like tea bags. You only know their strength when you see them in hot water. Think about that for a moment. Hot water meaning calamities. That's when you'll know how strong this tea is. And a very similar concept comes to us in a hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullahi wa salamu alayh. He says, it is in the changing of circumstances that the essence of men is revealed. When you are poor and you become rich, then your essence will show. When you are rich and you become poor, when you are healthy and you become sick, when you are ill and you become healthy, then your true color will show. Were you ill, constantly praying to Allah, when you became healthy, you forgot Him? Were you rich, when you became poor or lost your job, you despaired and lost hope? Were you poor and when you became rich, you became arrogant and miserly? So you don't know your value until circumstances change in your life, this way or that way. In an Islamic understanding, bala or suffering or affliction is not always in the negative or in the sense of loss. Sometimes health can be bala if it takes you away from Allah. Sometimes acquiring a lot of money can be bala if it takes you away from Allah. Anything that distances you from God is an affliction and a suffering, even if the rest of the world says it is a blessing. And anything that brings you close to Allah is a blessing, even if the rest of the world say it is an affliction and a suffering. So Allah's yardstick is very different from ours. Now, you may have guessed by now that fitrah does not see physical suffering as a problem. Fitrah sees physical suffering and calamities as simply a training ground, a learning. It is tabi'a, which is only concerned with the pleasure of the body and fleeing from the pain of the body, that sees suffering as a disaster. Or the ego, for example, might see it as a disaster. Now, I had mentioned to you a couple of nights back that I will talk about this hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in which he said, وَجَنَّةٌ لِلْكَافِرِ. This world is a prison for the believer, for the faithful, and a paradise for the faithless. Now, what do we understand from this hadith when we hear this? A lot of people interpret this to mean that it is a prison for the faithful because we are restricted with the laws of halal and haram. The faithless can do as he pleases. I cannot. There are so many things the faithless does, I would love to enjoy, but it's haram for me. The faithless gets to sleep in the morning, I have to get up and pray salat. It's hardship. So it is a prison because I endure the hardship of halal. But that is not true for a mu'min, because the Messenger of Allah, peace be on his family, did not say ad-dunya sijnun lil muslim. He said ad-dunya sijnun lil mu'min. For a mu'min, obedience to Allah is a pleasure, it's an honor. He loves his salat, he loves fasting, he loves doing halal. He is disgusted by haram. So he does not feel he is imprisoned by having to do halal and keeping away from haram. What is the other understanding? The other understanding is, well, the faithful suffer afflictions in this world. But afflictions is suffering only for one who is tabi'a driven. For a mu'min, afflictions is a blessing, it's a gift from Allah. It is a reminder, every time he suffers, he turns to Allah in supplication. So that cannot be the explanation. The only explanation you will find is the literal meaning, that a mu'min's soul is caged in this body, whereas he wishes to fly free and transcend and soar in the heavens, in the malakut as-samawat. And that is why, by choice, a mu'min would always want to be in the next world. He stays here for as long as he needs to either develop his soul or to help others develop their soul. And as soon as we have attained perfection, Allah does not want us to suffer meaninglessly. As soon as we have accepted and embraced suffering as not being evil, and we have purified and grown our wings, then Allah will do one of two things. He will either take us away from this world, and we will not want to come back, or He will keep us if He wants to use us to help others grow their wings. But other than this, there is really no place or room or purpose or joy or pleasure for a mu'min to abide in this plane of existence. And that is why some scholars say that Allah, out of His mercy, has intentionally hidden paradise from us, because if we could see paradise, it is so beautiful that our souls would not be able to remain in the body. So we see this world and we are mesmerized by it, but in reality it is just shadows, illusions. It is not even a tip of the iceberg compared to the real world. And that is why Allah keeps saying, you prefer the life of this world, the hereafter is far, far better, and it is everlasting. Now, so we need to transcend suffering, and we need to look at life and death very differently, and we begin by seeing ourselves in an alien body, and seeing that our assets are in the hereafter, not in this world. And everything we possess, we need to look at it from that perspective. I have wealth in this world, it is just lying in the bank. When I die, my heirs will take it. How can I take this world in the hereafter? I use it for khairat, I give it in charity, I help an orphan. By doing so, I transfer it to the hereafter. That's where I want my assets. On the day of judgment, I don't want to give accounting for my wealth and stand under that hot sun. So Imam Ali alayhi salam says, he says, if you don't want to carry all this burden with you on the day of judgment and stand there for a long time giving accounts for the millions you have, get someone else to carry the burden for you. How? give it in a good cause, give it in charity. They will carry it, you will take it on the other end. So we have to have this perspective that when I give for the hereafter, I'm not losing, I'm gaining. The only way to overcome the fear of death is to be convinced you've got nothing to lose. But this will not happen by simply sitting at home and saying, I've got nothing to lose, I've got nothing to lose, I've got... You have to work at it. If you can bring yourself to a status where you are convinced, I have got nothing to lose because I have built my hereafter. Now there is no reason to fear death. That will automatically take you to fitrah. And if we don't, we will still have to surrender this body at death. But now, it will be a panic. It will be a soul being pulled out violently from the body. The ego will say, I don't want to die. The worm will say, I don't want to leave the cocoon. But Malakul Maut will come with that surgical blade. He will cut open the cocoon and say, it's time to leave. Whether you grew your wings or you did not grow your wings. At that point, we will try to pretend we have wings. But there won't be any wings because we cannot fly if we have never grown something. And Allah shows us this in Quran, that when you die, you will not deny the truth. So you might as well acknowledge it now and work for it. In Surah Yunus, chapter 10 of the Quran, verse 90 and 91, he talks of the time when the Pharaoh or Fir'aun is drowning. Until when Fir'aun was drowning, he began saying, I believe now that there is no God except the one in whom the Banu Israel believe. And I am the first to submit. I am from the Muslimin. He used to call himself God. He used to say, Ana Rabbukum al-A'la. Now he says Muslimin. Allah answers Fir'aun. Now, in other words, you can fool everyone. You cannot fool yourself and you cannot fool Allah. Now, after all the transgressions you did, after your absolute refusal to develop your wings, and you are a mischief maker, you are a worm. So now saying La ilaha illallah, how will you become a caterpillar? You see, you can't escape from Allah. So that is why there is a saying, Allah grants respite, but He does not forget. He is not in a hurry. If you wrong me, I want to get you and avenge myself as soon as possible because you might disappear, you might run away, you might change your identity. Allah is not in a hurry. Take 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. Where will you run? If we live the life of a worm, we will die like a worm, begging not to be taken out of the cocoon. We will either die begging not to be taken out of this cocoon, or we will pretend to have wings and say, La ilaha illallah, La ilaha illallah. But at that point, Allah will say to us, Al-an, وَقَدْ عَسَيْتَ مِنْ قَبْلُ وَكُنْتَ مِنَ الْمُفْسِدِينَ. So this is very, very important that we do not neglect this idea of struggling towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Brother Khalil also cited Surah Al-Isra, chapter 17, verse 11, which teaches that man prays for evil as he ought to pray for good because he is hasty. We often ask for things harmful to us, not realizing their consequences. He contrasted two perspectives on hardship, the believer and the atheist. When calamities strike, faith gives meaning and resilience. Without belief in purpose or the hereafter, despair can overtake a person. He referenced the tragedy of Karbala, when Imam Hussein alayhi salam, even in unbearable loss, expressed that his suffering was eased by knowing Allah was witnessing him. Awareness of divine presence transforms suffering. He cited the hadith that whoever dedicates himself sincerely to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for 40 days will have springs of wisdom burst forth from the heart to the tongue. Wisdom is already within us. It must be awakened through discipline and spiritual hardship. Suffering reveals who we truly are. Like tea bags in hot water, our strength is revealed under pressure. Health, wealth, and comfort can also be trials if they distance us from Allah. Anything that brings us closer to Him is a blessing, even if the world calls it suffering. He explained the hadith that this world is a prison for the believer and a paradise for the faithless. For the believer, the soul feels confined in the body, longing to soar in the spiritual realm. Paradise is hidden from us because, if we truly saw it, our souls could not remain here. Finally, Brother Khalil spoke about death. The only way to overcome the fear of death is to become convinced we have nothing to lose, because our true assets are stored in the hereafter. Wealth used for charity transfers to the eternal realm. Otherwise, it remains a burden. He warned that at death, denial disappears, referencing Surah Yunus, chapter 10, verses 90 to 91, where Pharaoh, drowning, finally declared belief, but it was too late. Truth cannot be postponed until the final moment. He concluded by reminding the audience that Allah grants respite but does not forget. The opportunity to grow wings is now. Suffering is not distraction, it is transformation. And the journey toward Allah, though laborious, leads to eternal freedom. Thank you for watching. Let's make a difference together. If this video inspired you, hit like, follow, and share it with others. Your support helps spread knowledge and positivity, building a community where we all grow. Every like, follow, and share makes an impact. Let's keep the momentum going.